Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This podcast is made from the spaces I host every week on the Clubhouse app in the Social Impact Level Up Club. If you don't know me, I'm Wendy V, and I am a coach for socially conscious entrepreneurs. I help you develop your social impact mission, clarify your vision, and turn your ideas into action. Every week, I talk to leaders with a social impact mission about money mindset and manifestation. We also hold weekly spaces for our collective to join forces and change the world. In each episode, you'll hear me moderate the conversation with my two co-hosts, Rodrigo Bravo and Santiago Cáceres. Through this podcast, we hope that you will learn, grow, and thrive with our collective. Now, here's a little bit more about this episode. In this episode, we talk about what it means to have a growth mindset. If you are continuing to grow and learn, likely you are working on your well-being, particularly your intellectual well-being. And this episode is where we talk about what it looks like when you face your challenges with a growth mindset, how you overcome obstacles by learning and growing through them. When I talk to people about the 8 dimensions of wellness, I sometimes like to stop on a couple of pieces that are maybe not giving themselves credit for in their well-being. So personal development falls into the intellectual and occupational wellness, because that's really where you are challenging yourself to learn new things. Now, I also think travel falls in that category because you're experiencing new cultures, new places, new dishes, all these other things. And so when I think about growth mindset, I always frame growth mindset for myself as related to the intellectual and occupational well-being that I strive for. So that also could include the books that I'm reading, or it might include the TED Talks that I'm watching, or the types of conversations I'm choosing to engage in with my colleagues and friends that are about growing and learning new skills. And so growth mindset looks different for each of us, just like your well-being looks different for each of us. When you are working on your manifestation, when you're working on visioning, when you're working in your business, all of these things, you would find sometimes that it's actually not easy to constantly have a growth mindset, because a lot of the time what you are thinking sometimes is, we always say, really flavored by these mindset barriers that kind of kick in. And so when you encounter a mindset barrier and you're in a place that doesn't feel good emotionally, it's a little bit harder for you to kick into gear with the growth mindset. It doesn't mean that you either have a growth mindset or you have a fixed mindset all the time. I think generally people kind of stick in one or the other, but there's also this idea that sometimes, some reasons, you might actually get stuck in a fixed mindset and not be engaging in a growth mindset. So I'll give you an example. We were talking the other day about visioning in the Monday room, and I was mentioning that there was a whole year that I put my vision board in my closet, and then just sat in the back of my closet. And I didn't realize that by doing that physically, I was also putting the vision for my business on the back burner. And I didn't do anything about it. And part of the reason I said, oh, COVID, I don't have time. And I got stuck in this very fixed mindset that I needed to focus on my career in the government. That was the fixed mindset that I had. And I stopped trying to look at entrepreneurship and stopped trying to grow. And it wasn't that I'm not a person with a growth mindset all the time. I think it's just that the limitations that were placed around me in my life, in the point that I was at, in the role that I was at, didn't allow me to do both. I had to spend so much time in this very fixed world of responding to a pandemic. It didn't allow me the space to be creative, to think about how to explain information to people. Or I was having to use all of that creativity in this other environment that I was not enjoying, and I had nothing left to give to my business. So there's a lot of different ways that this idea of growth mindset comes into play in what you're doing. And I just want to give you guys tangible examples all the time of how these things work, because I think sometimes we're reading these words and we're seeing all these buzzwords everywhere, and we're not really putting them into context of what is going on with us and how do you do the things. The one thing that I realized in the government so heavily, a lot of people that failed in doing the actual goal or objective that they had was that a lot of the time they didn't actually plan what they were trying to do. So sometimes when you got to the implementation part of it, it was difficult for them to implement because they didn't do the planning. And the planning is where the growth mindset is really helpful. And I think that it's always beneficial for you to approach things from an open perspective, but I also understand that there are limitations in our lives that don't allow it sometimes.
In regards to growth mindset, I think we're always talking about making sure that we have that in mind. And that's it's tough. It's tough though. We encounter things, we have situations that pop up, obstacles that we face, and sometimes we get mired in that. We start focusing on those things as opposed to what's really helping me grow. And I'm guilty of that as well. And sometimes we do have to take a detour and whatnot, but it's always important to come back to that growth mindset and make sure that whatever we're doing, especially when it comes to our businesses, when it comes to our impact socially as an entrepreneur, that we have that growth mindset, that we are continuously thinking, how can I expand my mission, my why? What am I doing to make sure that I make that happen?
Growth mindset is really from a researcher, Carol Dweck, who is known for creating these two different sorts of thoughts about what mindsets people have. So the fixed mindset is your intelligence is static. And with the growth mindset, your intelligence can be developed. So there's just two perspectives of thinking about how you, as you are a person, generate information and intelligence and what you do with that information. And then with the fixed mindset, when you think your intelligence is just already there innately, you come with this certain amount of really high intelligence, it can lead you to think that you are already smart or that you need to look smart. And so then when you approach challenges, you avoid them. If there are obstacles, you kind of give up easily. If there's some effort, you're like, this effort is too much. And then if there's criticism, you ignore it and you don't really maybe the feedback. And then if there's other people who are successful around you, you might feel threatened by this success and seeing others be successful over you. So those kinds of things, I think, like I said, I don't think that anybody here would say, "Oh, we've all been in a growth mindset our entire lives." I don't think that's accurate, but I do recognize in here some of the things that I've done in personal development to move out of this space and into a growth mindset. So what I want you more to pay attention to are the places that you've already done some work to go from where I was just mentioning to this other space which is really called the growth mindset. So this is a more where you're thinking your intelligence can be developed. So it leads to a desire to learn, and then after you're thinking about, okay, I can learn, more things and more things, you would embrace challenges rather than avoiding them. You'll persist in the face of the challenges rather than giving up easily. You would see effort as a path to mastery or getting better at something rather than fruitless or not worth it. And you learn from criticism rather than ignoring it or thinking about it negatively. And last, you also would find that others' success are actually inspirational to you and help you kind of see more of an inspiring rather than a competitive sort of perspective. So those are the things that characterize a growth mindset. So when you're talking about the growth mindset, because it's your ability to think about how things are not, your qualities and your intelligence are not carved in stone, then that allows you to have different thoughts and actions that might take you down an entirely different road. And I think sometimes we think about that as creativity, but if you really think that you were not in a growth mindset, those things might not have come to you. So you wouldn't be on that other path. And it's this other sense of success is about you being your best self and not just being better than others. And that failure is actually an opportunity, and that effort is the key to success. And I think that's really important because when you see failure as a limitation, then you don't look for the thing to learn in it, and then you don't actually put more effort in. You might just stop altogether doing what you're trying to do. The things that they were saying when they looked at the research about who really is exceptional at this growth mindset, there was a couple of things I thought were interesting when they were talking about the types of people or the traits of people who fall into this, category of being exceptional. And one of them is that they have a talent for turning life setbacks into future successes. So if you listen to a lot of CEOs, a lot of TED Talks, people that have been successful and who have had to pivot their business, a lot of the time they would do that because they faced a challenge and they weren't going to give up. And then it was actually after they pivoted that they became successful because they were taken on a different path by that challenge. Another trait of these successful people is having an idea that things just haven't happened yet. Think, oh, I only have this amount of skills or abilities and I can't do this thing. You would be more in the mindset of saying, I can't do it now, but I recognize that it's still possible and I might be able to do it. So just not yet. And that really opens up a whole other world of opportunities that you would otherwise have turned yourself off to because you just already thought you couldn't do something. Then the last one I'll share is about learning and processing. Not just like moving on from mistakes, but reflecting on them and trying to learn what can be done better in the future. And I know this is one of the ones that comes with feedback. And for me, this is the one that I've had to work the most on is how to accept feedback. And one of the things having a coach has done for me when I finally opened myself up to that feedback, it was very uncomfortable. And you have to find the right person to push you to really get the honest feedback that you need to be successful sometimes. And so, one of the things that was hard for me was not only accepting the feedback, but also receiving feedback that was good, because it wasn't always feedback that was negative or that needed to be feedback that was corrective in some way. A lot of the time, it was feedback that was good that I was having difficulty with accepting. And so sometimes when you're learning and processing from mistakes, it isn't always just mistakes, it's learning and processing from different instances that happen. And what do you do with that? And how do you move forward?
I love to chime in on that last part that you're talking about, Wendy. I think a lot of times we do master the art of forgiveness or asking for apologies, but we don't master the secondary part. So, for example, when it comes to certain situations, there's a acronym, right? It says STAR. If I believe it's situation, task, analysis, results. And so one of the things that I love is a mentor of mine told me instead of star, think of it as stare, because you add that last one, and that's the experience. What are you learning from that? And sometimes, again, we do all the legwork at the front end and everything to get to a point where we either apologize or we get feedback or this and that. But then we don't do that analysis to find out why we got that feedback. What is it that caused that reaction? Why did we have to apologize? Why did this occur and this person had a reaction to that? I think it's really critical that we do take the time to analyze that and really get that feedback. I'm a big proponent of that. Whenever I feel maybe somebody feels a certain way or something, I'll ask for feedback. Like, hey, how can I better this? How can I, and not necessarily make things right, but how can I improve? Because sometimes you're already past that point of making things. You're just apologizing. Hey, things happened in the past, X, Y, Z. But how can I improve in the future? And a critical component of that is the feedback. And I love that you said that it's both positive and negative, right? A lot of times, I think we mistake being humble or trying to be humble for not accepting compliments. And I used to be terrible at that. When somebody would say, "Oh my God, great job, Rodrigo," this and that, I'd always say something to deflect, pretty hardcore. But I've learned, hey, if somebody's showing you some vulnerability by saying, "Hey, you did a great job. Hey, good job, good work." Accept that feedback, accept those compliments, and let them be part of that story that you have done good work and that you have people that can vouch for you and that they're willing to put themselves in line and say, "Hey, you know what? I worked with Wendy. I had a fantastic experience with Wendy, and Wendy, thank you so much for what you did for the work that I'm doing, and so forth." And accepting that feedback and say, hey, I appreciate that. Thank you. And learning from that feedback and see what else you can improve on that. So I just wanted to just elevate that message that you had right now because it is critical that we take that feedback, go both good and bad, and make sure that we learn from that and draw that experience from it so that we can become better versions of ourselves.
Just to piggyback on one of the things that I totally agree with what Rodrigo said, that when it comes to the feedback, you have to just be open to that. And one of the things that, at least that I use, is always be a student in everything that you do. And don't worry about trying to look good, or just focus on meeting the goal and always have that continuous improvement type of mentality, always looking to improve on everything that you can. And a lot of times that takes just taking a step back and reflecting. Because a lot of times we're operating, we're going, and we have the map, we have the plan. But once you get to that objective, you know, it's always good to do what I like to call, or I don't like to call it, but the military calls it, it's like, an after action report. What happened? What did we do? What did we do wrong? And what are some of those things as we can improve? Because you're going to make adjustments as you go. And so it's important to be able to have some type of good feedback loop, whether it's from a system you develop, a process you develop, or you have a good support system of people that hold you accountable, that are truthful with you, and are want to see the best version of yourself, and they want to see you succeed. And that's obviously depends on your selection, right? The people that you select around you. And it's always good to get people with diverse and different perspectives, right? Because you don't want to be surround yourself with a tribe that, or not a tribe, but folks that are just, it's going to be groupthink. It's also good folks that are just going to call you out because they want you to understand that you can do better, and they want to hold you accountable so that way you can be the best version of yourself. So I think definitely the feedback is good. Surround yourself with the right people. Surround yourself, put yourself in the right environment, be open, always be a student. And just know that, I think Wendy said it best as far as what they were talking about, the people that are successful is they're able to pivot, but you all have it all in you. You guys are resilient, especially. I think adversity is one of the best teachers of all. Myself, coming from a blue collar background, I love it. I think because of that, I'm more resourceful. It's gave me that, and that's an incredible skill to have. You don't need to necessarily learn how to do something if you don't know how to do it. Just know who to talk to. Just know where to get the information from. So I think with having little tidbits like that, it's going to make you more successful in itself. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody if they want to learn more about that. So this is Jeff Norden speaking.
It's funny, Jeff. You reminded me. I'm trying to type what you just said, which made me laugh. You don't always have to know how to do it, but you need to know where to get the information. In my department, in the policy office, one of the things that we always said differentiated us from everybody else in the organization is that we were really good Googlers. And everybody who just didn't have the patience to go down the rabbit hole, we would spend an entire day, like 4 people in a rabbit hole of information, to come out with an answer and then create this whole new thing from it, because that was part of the process, right? Part of the process is seeking information, learning information, and using that to do what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So when people ask you to do complex thinking, complex planning, a lot of the time, the first place you start is with your information research. And if you have that information from your own implementation of something, your own product, your own service, your own nonprofit that you're serving people through, you're able to better look at how to use that information to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But if you don't, there's always ways to get information that's general and could be applicable to you. And that's one of the things about the research rabbit hole, is that it really does help you grow when you learn what's possible. And when you do a little bit of digging, you might find that there's people who are expanding in ways that you didn't even know about. And then that might give you further ideas and further ideas. So it's always about trying to get yourself like just one step, one step, one step. And that way you don't get overwhelmed by trying to take everything in at once.
Yeah, I could go. Thanks for inviting me up. I think growth mindset is great just because I love doing new things, and you got to grow to do new things. I want to take a different approach to this and talk about like practical exercises. So knowing what to do, having the tenacity to actually find the information or have the network of support. I think that, but I'll share a quick personal story related to this. I saw a friend juggling 3 volleyballs. I'm like, damn it, that looks so cool. I'm going to do it myself. And I spent 3 weeks not eating, not sleeping. I was just like trying to throw tennis balls. By the way, if you're going to learn how to juggle, do not use tennis balls. Just find anything else than tennis balls. They just suck. They're they're terrible. They'll just bounce and roll to the farthest corners of the earth. But anyways, it took me 3 weeks to get it down, and I finally got it. Now I knew in my head before I started exactly what juggling looked like. I saw my friends, so I knew exactly how to do it. It was like that mindset of actually getting my body to do what my mind wants. And this applies to whatever skill you're learning, whether it's growing a new business. And when I showed it to my friends, they got it and it pissed me off. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I spent 3 weeks and they just got it with an hour. And everyone's like, oh, you're a great teacher. I'm like, no, bullshit. I must be stupid. And I did it again and again with these new activities. And, people kept coming to me and asking me, And what I realized what I was doing is that every time I was trying to do something new and I would get feedback, whether I was doing a musical on show and people would give me feedback, I was analyzing the feedback for usefulness or uselessness. So if someone said, "You were great," I'm like, "Yeah, but what could I improve?" And they're like, "No, you were like great. I really appreciated your performance." I'm like, "Yeah, but I messed up on the second line of the second act." And they're like, "What are you doing?" And giving you a compliment. I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not useful." And they would get pissed. That was the mindset that later I realized was like I was looking at the feedback to help me grow. And like it's good to get, compliments and things like that, but I would always analyze it for what can I use this to make myself better. And like those small little exercises that people take. So whether it's picking up a ball and throwing it in the air every time, or if you are trying to start a new business, breaking it down into that daily task where you can succeed. Every day I was able to catch one more ball. That was a success. I wasn't juggling, but as a success. And I think when we talk about the growth mindset, a lot of us talk about just the drive and the mission and the vision and the power and your why has to be so powerful you just get dragged along to it. And I think it's so much easier to live a life where you could achieve your goals every day, even if that's a goal of 10 minutes, I'm going to sit and do nothing and meditate, right? And if I can't do that, at least I did 5 minutes, or at least I thought about meditating, and maybe tomorrow I'll actually do it. And if you could feel that win, I think you're going to be more likely to grow and have that growth mindset, because if you're not enjoying the process of growing into a tree or you're growing a business, then when you have a business, it's just going to be a bigger problem.
With growth mindset, when I think you're absolutely right, the incremental action, we talk a lot about having consistent action. And I think as a group, we've been talking about consistent action for a while. What we've come to consensus in is that it doesn't have to be consistent daily action. That's where we started as the definition, consistent daily action. Now we've come to consistent action to help you move forward towards your goal that is moving you forward versus just having you spin wheels for the sake of taking action. So meaningful action. And that those are the things that help you reach your goals, but also help you make a social impact. I think as a group, a collective, or a club, a lot of the folks here have contributed to that as being our working definition of how this all goes together. And we definitely, a lot of us agree with breaking things into tasks that you can be successful with, or finding a way to continue to keep yourself motivated to bite off another task and another task so you keep moving forward. So absolutely would love to invite you to join the community, come back to a room. You're really in the same space. A lot of us are talking about the same kind of thing. With that said, if you guys don't know me, I'm Wendy. I'm an executive coach for socially conscious entrepreneurs, and I help you think through the ideas in your head and put them into action. And if you already have things in action, I help you scale and grow them and look at funding opportunities like grants and things like that. But the one thing I did want to talk about here that was part of the conversation, one of the quotes is, "Success is about being your best self." And I was just having a conversation with another entrepreneur this week who told me, "Oh, I'm in tech, so I can't actually be myself." And I challenged that. And I said, "I don't agree." And I was told tech image is this, and I have to portray it. Really, I'd rather be in my cowboy boots and my jeans and my whatever. And then, okay, then why can't you be the tech entrepreneur who wears cowboy boots? Like, why is that not a thing? Why is that not a persona you could have? And so I think that whatever version of you is you, one of the things that I know it has to grow is what your perception is of yourself. So what is your perception of your best self? And a lot of the times in my program, we talk about it as what is the most audacious version of yourself. So how can you be this version in your head and then be living it out as you are doing it? And in order to really get to this best self, you have to grow. You really can't be static and say you're going to be another version of yourself, because that doesn't work. So you have to be willing to take those forward motions towards this other version of yourself and realize that, and this is, I think, the second part of their conversation, that it's not about being better than others. And I hear this so much a lot, and I always want to invite people to remove that narrative from your mind that you have to compare yourself to others, because we all know that everyone is in a completely different place for a completely different reason, and it's on purpose, and you're exactly where you need to be right now, and where you need to be is not where somebody else is. And so it's not a failure, or if you don't look like, your journey doesn't look like somebody else's, it doesn't mean you're not successful. When you're looking at those things, what that means is that you're not spending that energy and that time growing into your best self. So you've chosen to offset the possibility of becoming your best self with putting effort into caring about what's going on with others. And that's one of the things I've actively decided that I'm not going to do, is spend energy caring or breathing or giving into others who are not going to promote me and my best self. And so I just want to invite you guys to also think about and reflect how you can do that as well. So if anybody wants to talk about that, is the last thing I will bring up from this article. And then I want to hear for sure, before we end this room, about everybody's what they're thankful for in terms of opportunities to grow in the future. So let's start off with just talking about your best self and not comparing yourself to others, but then we'll move into what, if you want to say what you're grateful for, go for it.
Yeah. So I put the stuff on my Instagram. It's pretty much just a private Instagram, or it's private in nature, and it's public. But one of the things I do is I put on this little quotes that I like to have, and I talk about stories that I've grown up, that I've done, that I've learned lessons from. And so one of the things that I talk about, I think it was the last one that I did, was about staying in your lane. When you're competing against somebody else, you're in the wrong lane. And it's really very parallel to what you're talking about, Wendy. A lot of times we do tend to compete against other people, when really what we need to be worried about is the best person that we are, or the best version of ourselves that we are. One of my clients, when I was talking about one of my clients, he had the same perspective, and he was always worried about what the mom, his co-parent, was up to. Ah, man, I just don't want my son to think that she's a better parent, or that she's the funner parent, or this and that. What I did, I gave him a copy of the track and field rules, and he was, "What's that?" And when I gave him the copy, I told him, just read the rules. There's a specific part of it that I wanted him to read, and basically, when it comes to the track and field, everybody's got to stay in their own lane. Everybody has to stay in their own lane from start to finish, lanes 1 through 8. And any athlete, any person that runs outside their assigned lane is subject to disqualification, straight up. There's no equivocation about that. If a runner even touches the other lane, and so if you think about it in that sense, our real goal is really what's best for us. How can we be the best version of ourselves? And sometimes when we don't stay in our lane, we actually do more harm to ourselves. And in fact, we can even disqualify ourselves from that greater purpose that we have. So I always feel like it's always important that we really try to maximize who we are. Because when we are competing against someone else, you're really in the wrong lane. That's not the lane you should really be in. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Wendy. And it just reminded me of that particular case, and I was just happy to share that right now. I'll share what I'm thankful for in a little bit. I just want to make sure everybody else has an opportunity to share. This is Rodrigo. I'm done.
Cool. Jeffrey, Lewis, either.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love that, Rodrigo. That's something that I definitely have to pick up that book myself. I like it. I like what you're going with that. And to me that just comes the concept comes to mind is collaboration. Always think collaboration, but then again, taking another step back is you define your own success. If you, I think to Rodrigo's point, if you're so focused on the competition, they're just going to eat up real estate in your. So if you're spending all that time worrying about them, you're not going to worry about yourself. You're just going to be you're just going to play defense the whole time. So to me, I think that's counterproductive. So I think to Rodrigo's point is you should definitely look at focusing on what you define as success, and then go on the offensive, drop some plays, and really think about how you can move the ball forward for yourself, depending on what your gift is, depending on what your service is, depending on what your product is, depending on the community that you're trying to serve, and then focus on that, and then focus on collaboration. Right? How can I serve Rodrigo? How can I serve Wendy? How can I serve anybody here? Support them in that space. So really think it's important on you defining the success for yourself, and don't let anyone else define it for you.
Now that you've joined our community by listening to this podcast episode, I want to welcome you to participate in a conversation with our collective very soon. If you're not on the Clubhouse app, you can connect to me on any social media platform as Wendy Veloz, Veloz. I'd like to thank everyone in our community who participated in this episode, and especially my partners in crime, Santiago and Rodrigo. Until next episode, keep changing the world.